He who curses the goddess of the small sun exuding the scent of chamomile will rid her of her curse. The day will finally come. The protagonist has been waiting for it for over 10 years. At that moment, Evelyn Diego appears in front of the prince. She is the adopted daughter of Count Diego. The prince is blindfolded and asks if she is the right girl. The knight replies that she is. After all, she's the only girl in the family. Now the prince realizes that this girl is the sun goddess from that prophecy. He takes a lock of the girl's hair in his hands and says that she really smells like daisies. This prince's name is Devin Lanthamus. He's the Dark Prince of the Empire. The prince orders that the girl be locked in this room and he will check on her tomorrow. The prince turns around and is about to leave, but at that moment Evelyn tries to stop him. But the knight hits the girl on the head. She passes out. He wonders if he hit the girl too hard. Finally, today is the day the protagonist has waited 10 years for, the day she was kidnapped by the Dark Prince. When the protagonist was 7 years old, she was called and told to get ready. After all, the girl will finally have a new home and can leave this place. The Count was asked to take care of the protagonist. The Count says that the main character is praised by everyone that she is a very capable girl. The game is very excited to meet his daughter. Evelyn is also incredibly happy about it. After a while they arrived and now the protagonist has a new home. Evelyn sees that the house is huge, and now she doesn't have to live in a temple and eat one herb and rice water all the time. And also no one will beat her with a rod. The main character will also live with a caring father. She will also have a home to which she can always return. Evelyn sees the flag and she thinks that it seems that somewhere she has already seen this pattern drawn on it. She doesn't understand if it represents the sun goddess, the symbol of the Diego clan. But at that moment, the protagonist remembers that this is the world inside the novel. The same novel that the protagonist liked so much that she even bought a hard copy. The cover of the first volume had a picture of the sun goddess on it. And if the memories of the protagonist is true, this novel had 3 parts. It described a special divine power, one that could heal incurable disease and lift a curse that no one else could lift. Among the characters in the novel was a main character named Cordelia who possessed divine powers. She grew up in a temple orphanage and was adopted by Count Diego, who abused her and used Cordelia's powers for his own purposes. But as is common in most romances, Cordelia overcame all odds. She met her love and lived happily ever after with the novel's protagonist. And the role of Evelyn in this story is a minor character who appears briefly at the beginning. This is Evelyn Diego. The main character is punched in the face and asked why she can't use her powers. She was 15 years old at the time and was locked up behind bars. The Count started to get angry and talked about how he was told that Evelyn had great power, so he paid a lot of money to bring her to this place. He didn't realize what a useless girl he had gotten. Evelyn realizes that she's useless because it was because of the Count that she wasted her strength and died. In the story, before she was 13, Evelyn spent too much energy and eventually died. Divine powers are not infinite, so if you spend them before they have time to regenerate, you can die. After Evelyn's death, the Count adopted Cordelia. Evelyn was just a means of demonstrating divine power. With the same powers, one dies and one lives. One of something. Still alive. She survived because she didn't use divine power. And Evelyn knew that she would survive. For as long as she lived, the Count would not adopt Cordelia. And the prince, as predicted, would take a girl from Count Diego's family. And it is Evelyn who will be the victim of the kidnapping. She will get out of this place and find freedom. The Count's beatings and abuse never stopped, but Evelyn persevered and held on. Then one day the Count said, "If Evelyn doesn't use her power, he will kill the puppy he holds in his hand." Evelyn used magic to save that puppy, but the Count didn't keep his promise. Evelyn went to the puppy's grave and apologized to him because it was all because of her. Count Diego's native son named Killian Diego one day came to the main character and apologized because he tried to come as early as possible. He promised to get the girl out of here. When Evelyn first came to this house in the basement, there were already signs of torture and abuse. Maybe it was Killian's abuse. Killian helped the protagonist. He saw her battered body and asked if the girl was in pain. He'd call her a doctor. He asked if there was anything he could do to help the girl. But the only help Killian could give her was to kill the Count, because that's all Evelyn wants. But Evelyn realizes that Killian can't help her. For if he didn't ask, Evelyn wouldn't have any hope. But Evelyn realizes she needs one thing. The girl turns to her brother and whispers in his ear that she has a request. She knows it will be hard to get, but she certainly wants to wear one medallion to the debutante ball. She asked her brother. When the main character turned 18, she sat in the garden with a cup of tea, and the girls who sat across from her laughed at her, because Evelyn had scratches on her precious face. Evelyn said it was an accidental fall. The protagonist thought about how simple-minded these girls are, probably because they grew up in a greenhouse. Evelyn doesn't understand. How could a fall cause such a wound? After a while, Sir Killian came to them and he started calling the main character. Killian said he got what Evelyn asked him for. Killian Diego is now the captain of the princess's guard. This piece of jewelry looks like an ordinary locket, but it is actually a magical instrument that exudes a floral scent. The protagonist need this item to impersonate the main character of the novel. Evelyn says that it must have been hard to get it and thanks her brother for helping her. Now the girls are left to wait. The girls turn to the main character and her half-brother. They talk about how the two seem so friendly that they are even jealous of them. Evelyn realizes that to those around her, that's exactly what it looks like. Beautiful, charming, and the captain of the Princess Guard. At this point, the girls start to get excited that they are about to have a debutante ball. The girls ask Killian what type of girl he likes. Evelyn realizes that these qualities of her brother are enough to attract the simple-minded ladies. Killian asks, do the girls have his ideal in mind? Killian talks about how he likes a girl with blonde hair and blue eyes, like sea blue eyes. At this point, he wrote Evelyn's appearance. Pretty soon, Evelyn will be leaving this place and she just needs to get away from here. The girls are asking who will be Sir's partner at the ball. After all, they still haven't chosen their dresses. A dark prince blinded by a curse, the goddess of the small heart, who exudes the scent of chamomile, will rid him of the curse. Hearing this prediction, the prince kidnaps Cordelia. Evelyn is very much looking forward to the ball. After all, the debutante ball is coming up. In the evening, Killian wanted to go to Evelyn's room. He knocked on the door and asked if he could come in, but he heard no answer and went into the room. He asked if Evelyn had already chosen a partner, but at that moment, Killian sees the open window in the girl's room. He doesn't understand where Evelyn could have gone. The next morning, the girl opens her eyes and can't understand if she is in the prince's manor. Evelyn realizes that she has succeeded and has been kidnapped. At that moment, Karen Weibo enters the room. He is the escort of the knight Devin Lanthomas and apologizes to the lady for addressing her. But he says the girl has a prince waiting for her. Evelyn realizes that means there was someone in this place. At that moment, the guy says that he forgot to introduce himself to the lady, and he says that his name is Karen Weibo, and he serves the prince. Evelyn remembers that she has heard that voice somewhere before. Evelyn remembers that it was the same guy who hit her on the head and knocked her unconscious. The knight admits that it was his fault then. Evelyn asks, isn't the guy at fault now? Knight apologizes. After a while, the protagonist and the knight walk through the manor. Evelyn thinks about the fact that this place is very quiet, and the rumor of something is a little something in such a huge mansion. Evelyn doesn't understand how it can be so quiet in a big house. At this point, Mrs. Evelyn is approached and asked if the girl knows about the prince and his situation. Evelyn replies that she knows all about it because it is a well-known story. Karen laughs and asks, isn't it true that there are strange rumors about the prince? Everyone knows that the oracle chooses the emperor's successor. Whoever isn't chosen gets a curse. Evelyn asks why the prince wants revenge. She asks, why would he turn to the darkness? There are many rumors about the prince. You say there are such rumors, but the prince is not such a bad man if you get to know him. After all, although they brought the protagonist to this place is not very pleasant way, but she should not be too afraid of them. At this point, the prince says that he has heard a prophecy that Evelyn will be able to lift the curse from him. He decides to get right to the point. He asks if Evelyn can heal him. At that moment, the protagonist sits across from the prince. Evelyn realizes that she needs to think hard about the deal, and at this point, the protagonist agrees and replies that she can do it. But she has conditions. After all, she needs money to leave the empire. The prince asks, is Evelyn really asking for money for healing? He starts laughing and says he didn't know the goddess was so calculating. The prince says that among the many rumors, there is one very strange one. They say that Count Diego's adopted daughter cannot use divine powers. He asks, "This has nothing to do with the goddess." Evelyn replies that she just doesn't use those powers. But that's not important. After all, if the prince does not understand her terms, she will assume that there was no conversation about healing. The prince replies that there is no simple solution to this issue. He asks, does Evelyn still not understand the situation? The protagonist has heard many rumors about the prince. After all, they say that the prince is a very cruel man. But no matter how threatened and tortured, Evelyn will use her powers as she wishes. The prince hoped the girl would be afraid of him. He asks who will remain stupid in that case. The principal replies that he will do as Evelyn wishes. He asks that the girl only lift the curse from him. At this point, the prince gets up and approaches the protagonist and says that, as Evelyn herself mentioned, he has a terrible temper, and he can't stand lying. And if it turns out that the girl deceived him at least in something, then she can pray that she can live a long life. After some time, the girl left the office of the prince and thinks that everything went smoothly for the beginning. At this moment, a maid named Hilda appears in front of the girl, and she will serve the lady. The girl says that today is her first day in this place, but she will do her best. The maid asks if Mistress is going to her room. Hilda is ready to help Mistress take the bathroom, but Evelyn replies that the maid doesn't need to do that. After all, Evelyn wanted to look around the place. Then the maid wants to show Mistress around, since it's her first job. Evelyn realizes that just in case she needs to check all the escape routes beforehand. Evelyn turns around and starts to leave. She asks Masha how she knows where to go when Hilda herself said that today is her first day. Hilda replies that she has already gone through the mansion and checked everything. At this time, the prince thinks that something strange has occurred to him. The man standing behind the prince asks what is troubling His Highness. Devon says that the seal of the Earl's clan symbolizes the sun goddess, and that this girl is scented with the scent of chamomile. All the clues in the prophecy point to her, but the prince doesn't understand why he feels like he's missing something. He doesn't understand why. Evelyn asks how Hilda ended up in this place. The maid replies that she heard the prince's estate was looking for a maid, although no one has ever worked here before. Evelyn realizes that means there are not just few rumors. There were none at all. But at that moment, the maid says she won't tell anyone. Evelyn doesn't understand what Hilda's talking about. Hilda's talking about the mistress being forced to marry the prince. Evelyn doesn't understand what's going on, but Hilda begins to apologize. After all, they say that the prince is a very cruel man, so he still hasn't married and forced this girl to do so. Evelyn doesn't understand where such rumors came from. Hilda asks Mistress, "Is it true that the prince is so cruel?" Evelyn asks, "Does Hilda really want to know how cruel the prince is?" "I don't know, Evelyn. I mean, it's probably true." The next morning, the protagonist what happens because she fell asleep last night. Evelyn remembers that she has been walking around the estate for a long time. At that moment, someone comes to the lady at the door and says that he has come for her. After a while, Evelyn comes out of her room and she sees the prince sitting in the parlor eating. Evelyn says that breakfast is good, but she needs to wash her face first. Prince says no washed-up girl or not. He tells Evelyn to just sit down and eat. Evelyn thinks about what the prince is thinking. Can't see anything anyway. She sits down at the table. The girl talks about how she noticed yesterday that there are too few servants, but Killian says there is one. Besides, he's given the girl a personal maid. Evelyn doesn't complain about the inconvenience, but she asks if it's all right with the prince himself, that there's no one here but the butler. The prince replies that somehow he doesn't like to be crowded. After all, the more there are, the harder it is to remember the sound of footsteps. Evelyn thinks that maybe she said too much. At that moment, the prince asks if Evelyn can start the treatment tonight. Evelyn remembers the treatment. Evelyn realizes she has enough divine power to heal the prince, and she can heal the prince, so she thinks they can start tonight. The girl needs to heal the prince and get out of the affair. At this point, the prince is sitting in his room and he hears some voice that says, "This is getting funny." The voice asks how the prince likes this girl. But the prince asks for the voice to shut up. The voice asks why he has to do this. After all, he and the prince have known each other for 5 years. It asks if Devon still thinks he's crazy. but the principal repeats to get the voice off his back. At that moment, the butler appears, who brings the mistress with him. The prince tells Evelyn to sit down, but after a moment, the prince asks why Evelyn sat too close to him. The mistress replies that it is in order to administer. The treatment is to be extremely close. She takes the prince's hand and tells him that before the healing begins, she needs to create a space that can accommodate the divine power. So, today, she will simply transfer her powers to the prince. The prince asks how the girl will be able to create the space. Evelyn replies that it will be a little uncomfortable, but Devon tolerates it. There's one detail that makes the protagonist wonder: is it really impossible for Dewan to see? In the novel, the prince was described as constantly hitting things and was extremely sensitive. But Evelyn noticed yesterday and just now that it's as if Devon can see everything. At that moment, Evelyn feels pain. The prince asks what is happening to the girl. At that moment, the girl almost faints. Evelyn doesn't understand what it is, because it has never happened to her before. Devon asks if Evelyn is okay. The girl has never felt so uncomfortable using force before. At that moment, Evelyn replies that she is not okay. The girl hears a voice. Evelyn asks who it is, where she is, but the voice replies that the girl doesn't need to understand it. Evelyn asks, is it reading her mind? But the voice replies that it reads more than just her thoughts. Evelyn asks who it is, but after only a moment, the girl opens her eyes. She doesn't understand. She doesn't understand if it was a dream. It's as if she's been beaten. At that moment, Hilda appears in front of the mistress. The maid asks if the heroine is all right. Evelyn says she's fine. Evelyn realizes it was a dream, but she doesn't understand what was in the dream. At this point, Evelyn asks the maid about His Highness's treatment. The maid heard that after the treatment, Evelyn fainted and Hilda was very frightened. Evelyn doesn't understand if Prince Dewan is all right. The heroine doesn't understand why she fainted. She assumes it's been too long since she used her divine powers and that's what caused it. The maid asks, maybe mistress needs something. But Evelyn herself doesn't know much about this kind of rare use of divine power. But after all, Evelyn has definitely invested the power all the way up to her shoulders. The maid turns to mistress and tells Evelyn to lie down for a while. But at that moment, Evelyn rises from her bed and thinks that in a few days, she will definitely be able to heal the prince's eyes. At that moment, the maid turns to the lady and says that she has heard that the temple is looking for a girl. Sometime later, the protagonist bursts into the prince's study. Devon knows that the protagonist has come to see him. He talks about how Evelyn is the only one in the house who walks around so noisily. Evelyn has come to ask something. Devon replies that Evelyn might as well ask, at lunch. At that moment, the girl notices a magical instrument in the prince's hands. She asks, is Devon talking to someone? But there is nothing she can do about it, so she will have to wait. At this moment, the girl sits down on a chair. After all, if Evelyn doesn't find a reason why she fell down yesterday, no one can guarantee that it won't happen again next time. And then Devon will start doubting her. Evelyn thinks that she can try to test her divine powers with the sword that is in the prince's room. At that moment, the girl asks Devon if she can touch it. But the girl feels like Devon doesn't even hear her. The general silence is a sign of agreement. At that moment, the girl walks over to the sword and picks it up. With her right hand, the girl clutches the sword and it starts to bleed. The prince rises from his table and he starts to shout. He asks what Evelyn is doing. He takes the girl's hand and tells her that it smells like blood. Evelyn apologizes because she didn't mean to stain the floor. The prince says that next time, Evelyn will ask him. But Evelyn doesn't understand what she should have asked. The prince replies that if Evelyn wants to cut off her limbs, he can do it without pain. The prince takes the weapon away from the girl and says that if Evelyn planned to threaten Winter, she has chosen the wrong target. But Evelyn replies that the prince seems to have it all wrong. After all, she just wanted to test her strength. She has questions about last night's treatment, and Evelyn sees that there's no problem with her skills after all. After all, at that moment the girl used her hand healing and the wounds disappeared. Evelyn doesn't understand why she fainted yesterday. The prince asks what this is such a horrible way to test powers. Evelyn apologizes if the prince was uncomfortable. At that moment, the girl remembers that she wanted to ask the prince something. Evelyn talks about how her mistress told her that she was being sought at the temple. At this point, Devin apologizes to the girl, but he talks about how he can't let her go. Unless Evelyn is with them, he's cursed. Evelyn asks what it means to let go. The prince asks, "Didn't Evelyn mean for him to let her go?" But Evelyn replies that she in no way wants him to. She says the prince can't send her there. After all, the temple doesn't know she's there yet. The prince doesn't think so either. He wonders why Evelyn doesn't want him to send her to the temple. To send her to the temple. Evelyn replies that if that's the case, she wants to heal the prince and then get a big piece of the action. Evelyn realizes she'd better explain it that way. The temple had the perfect image in the empire. Even if Evelyn told what she experienced there, no one would believe her. They forced children with healing skills to work non-stop. And then a very scary thing happened to them. No one knew about this side of the temple, except for the people who were being sacrificed. Evelyn says that whatever the beginning was, she and the prince made a deal. And Evelyn will do whatever it takes to break his curse. And the prince will help her leave the empire, so no one can know she's in this place, because whoever it is. After a while, Evelyn is in the bathroom washing her hands. She tells the prince that he doesn't need to follow her. She's just washing her hands. Devin talks about how he's worried about Evelyn getting into trouble again. He asks, "Has Evelyn gotten used to the pain?" But Evelyn doesn't understand. It's not possible. The prince tells her that girls shouldn't do such crazy things anymore. He doesn't want to smell blood at home. Evelyn agrees, and next time she will do it in the bathroom. But the prince says that the girl doesn't need to do it anyway. Sometime later at breakfast, the prince asks, what's the reason why the always so quiet temple is suddenly bustling? He asks how Evelyn knew about it. Evelyn replies that Hilda told her. At that moment, Devin tells her that people are saying that a girl is sick, and her name seems to be Cordelia. At that moment, the girl freezes. The prince asks what's wrong with the girl, but Evelyn doesn't understand. If Cordelia is sick, Cordelia is the real protagonist of this novel. At that moment, the butler turns to the lady and tells her that Evelyn has gone pale. The prince asks if the girl knows the name, but Evelyn replies that she doesn't even know it because it's the first time she's heard the name. Evelyn took Cordelia away from her role. That's why she's still in the temple and still being bullied, so her power has probably reached its limit. In order to restore those with powerful powers, you need someone of a similar level. And that's what Evelyn is best suited for, and maybe they want to use her as a guinea pig to heal Cordelia. She's much stronger than Evelyn, so the temple won't spare a girl like Evelyn. The girl thought she could change the plot of the novel. It's like whatever she did. There's no escaping fate. Evelyn can't sit around and wait to be captured. She wants to apologize to Cordelia for leaving her the protagonist. Evelyn just wants to live. In the evening, the protagonist came to the prince's house, and there was also a knight Karen accompanying her. Karen says that the lady looks terrible. After all, the girl looks very tired and has black circles under her eyes. At this point, the prince asks what is wrong, but Evelyn replies that nothing special has happened. At that moment, the girl thinks about what excuse she can come up with. Evelyn says that she is just homesick. Karen starts laughing and says that in that case, he will go. At that moment, Evelyn sits down next to the prince. Devin had heard that Evelyn was very close to her brother. Evelyn doesn't understand why the prince brought up Killian. Evelyn says they'd better get to treatment. It's too late. At that moment, the girl takes the prince's hand. Evelyn says that today she will try to put divine power into the whole body. The prince asks, will the power be put into the whole body? He wonders if it will be all right. But Evelyn tells the prince not to worry because it's not dangerous. But the prince isn't worried about himself. He's worried about the girl. He can't help worrying after Evelyn fainted yesterday. Evelyn replies that it's probably because she hasn't used her power in a long time, and she's fine now. At the temple, Evelyn has already broken the curse. It shouldn't be a problem, but Evelyn wasn't at her best this time. Besides, she has enough divine powers. It's just that Evelyn hadn't used it for a long time. At that moment, Evelyn starts to hear some strange voice again, and at that moment she pulls her hands away from the prince's hands. The prince asks what happened to the girl. Evelyn thought it was because she hadn't used her divine powers for a long time, but she was wrong, because it was a curse. There's something in the prince's right eye. This is different from the story in the novel. The prince says, that the girl must have known the curse, and there are too many strange things about it. The prince asks why the girl fainted during the healing, why she hasn't used her powers yet. He asks what Evelyn is so afraid of right now. After all, if she is the maiden from the prophecies, she should not be afraid of curses. Evelyn realizes that Devon suspects her. He wonders if Evelyn is the prophecy maiden. There's no one in the Empire who doesn't know about Duan's curse. It's a curse sent by a deity, a sign that the oracle has not chosen him to be the next emperor. The deity sends the curse so that those who are not chosen cannot retaliate or rebel against the ruler. They spend their lives searching for someone who can lift the curse, and when they do, they just live their lives. The goddess of the small sun exuding the scent of chamomile will deliver the prince from the curse. The contents of this prophecy are known only to the prince and the protagonist. That's why he had no questions until now. Evelyn could not lose consciousness again, or the prince would doubt her even more. But the girl's awareness is clouded against her will. The protagonist was already thinking about not changing the plot of the book and running away from this place. After Killian joined the Imperial Palace, unlike the protagonist, he was free to travel to and from the county. And leave the county. I'm sure of it. After all, he'd already saved some money in the service. Evelyn supposed that maybe Killian could help her financially. When Killian appeared in front of the girl and asked, did she really need money? Killian replied that if Evelyn was in the county all the time, she had nothing to spend the money on. But Evelyn was wrong. In fact, in her relationship with Killian, she was far from the first place. It looked as if Killian listened to her, but Evelyn was only part of his circumstances. And Evelyn realized that there was no way Killian would let her leave. Evelyn replied that if Killian didn't want to give her money, he might as well not. Her only option was for Devon to kidnap her, and then Evelyn could get out of this place. It was the last way. To stay alive. Evelyn made a ridiculous plan and tried to escape, but she was caught. And it wasn't the Count, it was Killian. The next morning, Evelyn wakes up and hopes it was just a dream, but at that moment, the prince appears behind her and asks, is Evelyn going to make up an excuse again? He is ready to hear it. Evelyn replies that with her divine power, she can quickly rid the prince of the curse. But there's basically something else besides him. The girl's divine powers are not the problem at all. And in the right eye of the prince, there is something incomprehensible. However, the protagonist remembers that in the novel there was no such thing. The girl promises the prince that tonight she will make his left eye see. Evelyn means that she will treat the principal in order. Let Evelyn not know what there is in the left eye she can cure. This is the last attempt to dispel the prince's opinion. After a while, the protagonist leaves her room and goes outside. She takes the maid by the hand and asks, is this really the main entrance? After all, if the prince has already begun to suspect the protagonist, Evelyn can't just sit there. In the room, she needs to find an escape route as soon as possible. The maid was screaming about her arm being ripped off. Evelyn let her go. But the girl says that Hilda promised her she'd show her everything. She made her wait. Hilda replies that maids have a lot of work to do. Evelyn takes a walk, and she sees that she is in this place for the first time. The protagonist sees the guards in front of her. They say that the girl can't go any farther. Evelyn asks, is this really the prince's order? The guard replies that it is not, but still they need to stick to the established position. At that moment, Sir Karen appears. He greets the protagonist. Evelyn talks about how Karen appeared so suddenly as if he had been following her. Karen asks, is it really that noticeable? Evelyn starts talking about how she wanted to take a walk outside the gate. She asks if she can do it with the knight. Karen replies that he needs the prince's permission. Karen turns to the guard and asks if he can go and ask the prince. Evelyn thanks the knight and asks if she can call him by his name. The knight replies, that of course the lady can call as she pleases. Evelyn says that in that case Sir Karen can call her by her name too, but Karen replies that he can't do that. It's too much. Karen says, girls, you shouldn't joke about knights like that. Evelyn asks, is it really that obvious? At that moment, the guards come in and say that His Highness has authorized a knight to accompany the lady. At this point, Evelyn wanted to turn to her maid, but she saw that Hilda had disappeared somewhere. The knight asks, is Miss Evelyn looking for someone? The heroine doesn't understand. Has Hilda already returned to the palace? Once outside the castle, the protagonist learned that it was surrounded by a river and could only be reached by a bridge. And also compared to the size of the castle itself, guards were not so many. The only problem was, he was Karen Weibo. His family was a rather famous knight clan. It was likely that Karen was a very capable knight. If Evelyn hurries up and escapes, then Karen goes right away. At this point, Evelyn asks the knight if he has ever been outside the Empire. Karen tells him that he has been on military campaigns a few times. Before coming here, Karen served in a frontier knight order. Evelyn says that's incredibly amazing, and Evelyn has hardly ever been out of the county. The girl also says that people say that in the north there is a beautiful place called Elion. She asks if Karen has ever been there. Evelyn accidentally read about this place in a book when she was looking for a place to escape. I wish she could get some information about it. Karen replies that of course he's been to the place, because it snows all year round. It's also very beautiful, but it's hard to live there. Evelyn says that it must be hard to get around when there is a lot of snow. Karen replies that it's hard even on horseback or in a carriage. When he was there, he tried a little sledding. He's athletic, but even for him it wasn't easy. Evelyn is disappointed because she asked the wrong question, but Karen goes on to say that he's a bit embarrassed to say it. But at the time, he was quite a famous poet in his youth. Karen tells us what adventures he'd had. Thanks to the knight's endless chatter, Evelyn was convinced that Elion was the right place to stay. Evelyn says the garden is surprisingly beautiful, and it seems to be well cared for. At that moment, the girl sees Karen start to cry. Evelyn is puzzled and asks what is going on, but Karen apologizes because it must look unexpected the new prince has no craving for the impossible that we. Even his office is very simply furnished. Evelyn says that this garden does look beautiful. Karen replies that if the lady had seen the garden in its former state, she would not have said such words. After all, this garden is a credit to the warriors. They had nothing to do, so it was a hobby. Evelyn suggests there didn't seem to be much trouble at the time, but Karen says it's still in the suburbs. Besides, His Highness is quite interested in the throne and politics. Evelyn thinks that after meeting him in person, it seemed to her that, contrary to rumors, the prince has no interest in palace affairs. Devon just wants to break the curse and continue to live on the estate. Devon just wants to live a quiet life. Evelyn realizes it's a bit like her. But the protagonist and the secondary characters can't be alike. Evelyn doesn't understand what's wrong with her and who else she should be worried about. In the evening, the protagonist goes to the prince's house again to heal him. Karen asks if Evelyn is confident in her abilities. Evelyn replies that of course she is. But the protagonist thinks that she is not confident at all. She tells the prince that perhaps she will faint again, so she hopes for the prince's understanding. The principal replies that this will happen if only Evelyn is responsible for the outcome. Evelyn realizes she can't be responsible. But this is her last attempt. But it all worked out. Evelyn transferred the divine power to him through her left hand, and the girl didn't get that strange feeling. This is the answer. Suddenly, the girl starts to feel that aura again, which feels like it's about to take over her divine power. It's an obscure, dark energy. Evelyn is exhausted, but she wants to do something. Just a little more to release at least the prince's left eyes. After a while, the mistress releases the prince's hand and says that she is done. The girl says that if the prince doesn't believe her, then he can get a doctor to check. She also asks Devon not to open his eyes right away, because harsh light can be dangerous. Evelyn has broken the curse as promised. Now the prince must keep his promise. The prince asks if the girl's money will do, or if she needs gems. She needs gems. Evelyn isn't sure about the money. Evelyn doesn't realize roughly how much money it might take to leave the empire, but she replies to let the prince do just that as it is more convenient for himself. At this point, suddenly the principal asks what Evelyn looks like. The girl asks, "Is it really so sudden?" At this point, the prince calls for the butler. The butler turns to His Highness and says that the lady's hair is green-yellow, of a color like the petals of a flower, and her eyes are blue like the sea. It's as if there are stars glittering in her eyes. Devon asks, "Does that mean the girl just has blonde hair and blue eyes?" Devon replies that lapis lazuli would be the way to go. After his mother died, the prince inherited a lapis lazuli brooch and asks to have that brooch brought to him. The prince tells him that it is the brooch his mother left him. The arrow is the symbol of the imperial family. The prince asks the butler if this jewelry will fit the girl. The butler replies that this brooch will match the lady's eyes perfectly. Evelyn replies that it looks very expensive. The prince says he will give her gold in addition to it, and Evelyn can take it with her when she leaves. Evelyn realizes it can't be the treasure of the imperial family. Well, she can take the stone out and sell it separately. After all, such treasures are priceless. After a while, the protagonist is in her room, and the maid asks her mistress what this money is. Evelyn asks the maid how much money is in here approximately. Hilda tells her that her family can live on this money for 3 months. Evelyn asks how many people are in the girl's family. Hilda replies that together with her, they have 4 people in their family. Sometimes Evelyn looks at the maid and sees that she is just as unusual. For at this moment, Hilda could not remember how many people are in her family. The amount on which an ordinary peasant family can live for 3 months is enough. Evelyn asks Hilda to prepare a bathroom for her. Evelyn doesn't know if she can heal the prince's right eye. There's no telling when the temple will come for her. And it would be better to leave for Hellmoon now, while Devon still trusts her. But if Evelyn doesn't break the curse completely and runs away, she doesn't realize what could happen to the prince's eyes. The girl suddenly notices that Hilda has forgotten to lock the door again. The girl gets up and goes to the door and starts calling for her maid. Evelyn doesn't understand if Hilda has already disappeared, but she does not realize if she heard the sound of the girl's footsteps. When the protagonist strolled through the garden with the knight, she noticed a wall that seemed to be easy to climb down, and judging by the rising clouds of smoke and the location of the kitchen, after a while the protagonist goes into the kitchen. There was a girl yelling that the water was boiling. She was asking for the cook to fry some more. She asked, "Can't the cook see it's not ready yet?" She starts to get angry and talks about how she asked to go to the pantry. But that's when she notices the mistress. Evelyn thinks she should just check out this path, which might be an escape route. Evelyn says she's just checking out the castle. She asks if they mind. But the girl replies that of course they don't mind as long as mistress can do it. It's as much as she likes. At this point, Evelyn talks about the fact that there are quite a few people here. The girl tells that His Highness is a real gourmet, so he always has a lot of rumors in the kitchen. Then the protagonist asks what kind of food the prince likes, but at that moment, the girl notices a surprising reaction of the maid. The girl says that the protagonist, as the future mistress of the castle, must be interested. She tells her that the prince prefers fresh salads and undercooked meat. She asks anything else of interest to the mistress. After all, she can ask her as much as she likes. Evelyn thinks about the strange rumors about her and the prince. At that moment, Evelyn asks if the doors in this place are always open. But the maid replies that the doors are not always open, and at 11 p.m. they finish their work and then close the kitchen. Evelyn starts laughing and asks, "Does that mean that if she gets hungry, she can't sneak into the place?" The maid replies that Evelyn can go to the butler. He has almost all the keys to this lock. Evelyn asks, "Is it true?" And she concludes that the butler is in this midst. Evelyn realizes that in that case, it will not be as easy to climb down the wall as she thought. The maid asks if there is anything else mistress is interested in. Evelyn looks out the window and thinks that unless she dies, she can get out. She tells the maid that she has learned a lot thanks to her. The maid was glad to be of use to mistress. The protagonist is already walking around the castle and thinks that she has checked almost all the ways of escape. If she's lucky enough to heal His Highness's right eye, she'll just take the money and leave. If not, she'll have to run away from this place. Suddenly, the protagonist doesn't notice the prince and bumps into him. Evelyn thinks about the fact that she hasn't seen the prince near the kitchen before. Evelyn doesn't understand what the prince is doing in this place. At this point, Evelyn starts to fall, but suddenly the principal grabs the girl's hand and he asks someone who doesn't even look forward walking around his house. Evelyn apologizes for just being thoughtful. The prince asks, "Is it really Evelyn?" He says it's good he met the girl because he wanted to talk. The prince forgot to tell the girl something yesterday and was about to go to her. At that moment, the prince and the girl start walking. The prince tells that the main character's brother, Killian Diego, asked him for an audience. The prince talks about how the brother couldn't have known that Evelyn was in this place, and most likely, it has nothing to do with the girl. Devon has heard that Evelyn is pretty close to her brother, so he might let her see her brother from afar. Evelyn thinks about Killian coming here to catch her. Evelyn doesn't understand how her brother could know she's in this place. Evelyn asks why the prince would let her do that. But the prince replies that he did bring her here without telling anyone. But Evelyn doesn't mean that. She asks why her brother is asking for an audience with the prince as well. The prince replies that Killian is the head of his sister's guard, and it's not strange that he decided to pay him a visit. Evelyn asks if the prince can refuse to see him. Killian might guess that it was Devon Lanthamus who kidnapped her. The prince replies that he'd like to refuse the guy, but he can't. For if he does not accept him, the prince may be suspected of preparing a rebellion against the crown princess. Evelyn asks when Killian will arrive. The prince replies that the boy will arrive tomorrow. At this point, Evelyn walks close to the prince and takes his hand. The prince asks what's wrong. At this point, Evelyn says that she thinks it would be best to fix Prince's right eye today. Devon asks what the girl is even talking about. Evelyn replies that the prince also wants to heal as soon as possible. The prince says that in that case, they will see each other tonight. Evelyn doesn't understand if the count knows about it, or if it's Killian's initiative. If she is caught, she will probably be put back in the dungeon. Evelyn asks if it is better for her to persuade Killian and escape together. But the girl realizes that Killian won't agree. Even if she does, she doesn't want to live with him until she dies. She has to leave this place before Killian gets here. But Evelyn doesn't realize if she can distract Karen. For a knight like Karen could easily hold her off and break her arms and legs. Evelyn realizes she needs to steal the kitchen key and jump out the window, climb down the wall and over the fence and across the bridge to the border. But Evelyn doesn't realize if she can do it. At that moment, a maid appears behind the protagonist's back. Hilda asks her mistress if she likes daisies. Evelyn didn't even notice Hilda coming over. Evelyn asks the girl where she came from. Hilda asks why mistress is so surprised, because she had finished her mistress's business early and came. Evelyn has always felt a strange feeling. Hilda talks about being the only maid in the castle. Hilda asks mistress who besides her will serve the girl. At some point, Hilda stops being afraid of mistress and stutters. Evelyn doesn't understand. Could it be that Hilda came here and in just one day learned where everything is in this castle? Besides, the rumors from the temple reached her so quickly. Evelyn doesn't understand. How could it be so? The girl wonders if Hilda is a common maid. Hilda says that the mistress shouldn't stay out late. Evelyn asks the maid why she stopped stuttering. At that moment, a voice appears and asks mistress if she misses those times. He suggests that mistress was quick to guess. After all, it's no surprise that Evelyn had been fitting in with others since she was a child, and it was necessary for the girl to survive. The voice asks what the expression on the protagonist's face is. Is she afraid of him? Or does she prefer the image of the maid Hilda? Evelyn doesn't understand who this girl is. Can she escape from this place? For surely Karen is following her somewhere nearby and she needs to call for help. At that moment, Hilda says not to worry, mistress. Suddenly the voice reappears, saying that he is not going to harm the girl probably. The voice apologizes and talks about how he had no other way to stay close to her. I think she said she's going to heal the prince today. That's when they'll see each other. The voice thinks it would be best to erase this situation from her memory. At that moment, with a snap of her fingers, the girl forgets everything that happened, and the voice says that the lady is about to get a little dizzy. At this point, Evelyn asks the girl what she just said. Hilda repeats that she asked if Mistress Daisy liked her. But Evelyn doesn't understand why Daisy's all of a sudden. Her head feels like something strange just happened. Hilda talks about Mistress Evelyn just sitting in front of the daisies for a long time. Evelyn asks, "Are those really daisies?" They are. If you look closely, there are daisies all over the castle grounds. Evelyn doesn't understand if they were planted on purpose. At this point, Evelyn replies that she doesn't really like daisies. She turns to the maid and asks if they happen to talk about it. At this point, Hilda asks, "Is there something wrong with mistress?" But Evelyn replies that she was just asking. Evelyn doesn't understand why she feels like she's forgotten something. At this point, the girl holds her head, which is spinning. That evening, the prince is sitting by the window and the main character comes to him. She asks if the prince has called a doctor. The prince says it's just like Evelyn said. The curse. Not anymore. but to start seeing normally. It'll take a few days. And today, Evelyn will fix his right eye, and then they will work together to restore his sight. The prince starts to get up, and Evelyn says that he can sit down. She suggests to sit by the window today because it is cooler there. Perhaps today's treatment will be a little different. The prince says that it doesn't matter and that he wants to heal. Since Evelyn has been busy with the treatment of his left eye, Duan no longer doubts her abilities. At this point, the girl takes the prince's hand and tells him that she will be starting. Evelyn was about to run away, if she hadn't been able to heal her right eye. And now the girl sees how much the prince trusts her, and Evelyn feels guilty before him. At that moment, a voice appears again, saying that they have met again. Evelyn knew it, because this is no ordinary curse. Evelyn doesn't know if she can break it. It's such a powerful energy, could swallow up her divine power. The voice apologizes, but the girl can't kick it out. It asks if the girl can surrender, because if Evelyn brought it, it will take away her divine power. He asks, has the girl had a hard time with her? After all, she should only get rid of this power and the girl will be much calmer. As Evelyn listened to the whispering, a thought occurred to her. Maybe everything would be all right if she didn't have these powers anymore. Because of the powers, she was used in the temple. She was tortured in Count Diego's house. If Evelyn gives up the divine power she's suffered so much for, maybe it's for the best. The voice asks why a girl would want to live with so much effort. After all, he just wants to help her. Suddenly, the prince falls down, losing consciousness. Evelyn thinks about her body relaxing. The girl also loses consciousness. Evelyn doesn't realize what will happen to her if her powers disappear. Suddenly, the girl thinks about why she is so desperate to stay alive. The count asks her why Evelyn doesn't use her powers. He calls her a useless girl. Killian asks her why she needs money if Evelyn is in the count's manor anyway. Also, the protagonist remembers a beautiful place, up north. Because of course it is. It snows all year round, but it's a beautiful place. Suddenly, the protagonist opens her eyes and remembers the snow. She wanted to go to Elian. It's not for nothing that she put up with it for 10 years just to give it all up. At that moment, the protagonist approaches the prince. She doesn't want to die because of some fickle creature. The voice appears again. It asks if it means Evelyn doesn't want to give up. Suddenly, this monster rips from the prince's body. Evelyn can barely feel the divine power inside. Has she lost it? But Evelyn thinks she must be conscious. A voice says they'll see each other next time. He asks who needs these goodbyes anyway. After a while, the protagonist wakes up and starts screaming. She remembers the treatment and realizes that it didn't work out. She thinks she's lost to this black creature, and she needs to run away right now. The girl puts on her cloak and takes the brooch. Evelyn goes to the door, and just as she thought it was closed, she needs to go to the butler's room and find the key. But Evelyn thinks that maybe she should look for another way to escape. Suddenly, the door opens. Evelyn doesn't understand. The door to the kitchen is open, but it was closed. Maybe she imagined it, but she doesn't know why. But anyway, she opens the window and thinks it's her chance to escape. Already, the girl is trying to climb the wall. She thinks that the wall is quite steep, but it turns out to be not so difficult. Evelyn has never done any exercise in her life, but it's very easy for her to climb down the wall, which is amazing. But at that moment, Evelyn misses something, and the girl starts to fall to the ground. Suddenly, there is a black force that picks up the main character. Evelyn doesn't understand what happened. After all, she was flying so high that she must have hit hard. Evelyn decides to think about it later, and now it is important for her to leave the place. But it turns out that the girl dropped her pendant. Evelyn sees that there is a gate. She doesn't understand how she can get through it. She asks, will she have to climb down the wall again? But Evelyn doesn't know if she can get through without being seen. With the power she just felt, she might be able to distract the guard with magic. The girl summons her power. Evelyn doesn't know what she's doing in this situation where every minute counts. Suddenly, Evelyn doesn't realize what's happening. The guards start running because there's been some kind of explosion. They don't understand. They don't understand if it's an attack. Then Evelyn realized that it wasn't an accident, and she had the help of some unknown force, like that dark aura in the prince's right eye. The girl opened the gate, and that she didn't understand why this force had helped her. But suddenly a barrier appears in front of the protagonist. He is quite a high level. Now Evelyn understands why the guards here were so unreliable. But with the girl's power now, she can get through the barrier. Evelyn is able to pass through the barrier, and she realizes that it's too early to catch her breath because they are about to come for her. Suddenly, the protagonist notices one room. She doesn't understand. Is that light coming from the prince's room? She mentally apologizes to the prince. For if everything had gone according to the plot of the novel, the prince would have met Cordelia and would not have been freed from the curse. And because of Evelyn, their fates are reversed. Suddenly, the girl can't figure out where her locket is. She wonders, where did she lose it? Although Evelyn thinks that maybe it's for the best. There's no reason for her to smell daisies for the prince. Evelyn will never see this place again. The girl hears the sound of horses neighing. She doesn't realize who it could be at a time like this. Suddenly, the protagonist notices her brother Killian. The girl thinks that Killian should have arrived tomorrow. She doesn't understand what Killian is doing in this place. Suddenly, Killian turns around and is asked, "Did the commander see something?" But Killian replies that he must have imagined it and they need to hurry. Killian and his knights go on their way. Evelyn realizes that she has to get away from this place, and as far away as possible. At this time, it starts to snow. She needs to run where no one can find her. Knight Karen asks the doctor what the problem is. If the curse is broken, why doesn't the prince wake up? He asks if there's no mistake in the results. The prince thinks he's too noisy. He doesn't understand. If it's the voice of the Knight Karen. The doctor says that medically there are no abnormalities in the prince, and she herself does not know how to explain it. Suddenly, the prince regains consciousness. The knight starts to run toward the prince. He asks if Prince Divan is all right. The knight says the prince better not get up so abruptly. Divan gets angry and says he can't sleep. With all the noise, he asks what happened. After all, he had his right eye treated. He asks for an explanation of what happened. The butler tells him that on the day when Winter's right eye was treated, a long time had passed, but there was no order from the prince, and the butler decided to go to his room. The prince is angry and asks the butler to talk only business, because he says a lot of unnecessary things. The butler says that they were both lying on the floor, so he immediately called the doctor and the priest. But even after they arrived, the prince never came to. He did not come to his senses. The prince asks what happened to the curse. The doctor replies that the priest looked at him, and the prince is completely cured of the curse. The prince says he has not seen the girl. He asks who she is, which answers his questions. The girl says that she is the prince's personal physician. She is very nice to meet. Also, the Knight Karen says that Miss Evelyn is missing. Devon asks how that happened. After all, they say he is completely rid of the curse. Knight Karen says it's more accurate to say that Evelyn escaped and disappeared. After all, it seems the girl made her way into the kitchen and down the castle wall. The prince asks, does the knight want him to believe that a girl who grew up in a prosperous count's family could climb down the wall and run away? The knight says that a window was open in the kitchen and that there were traces of Evelyn climbing down the wall. Then she went through the gate and fled. The prince asks what Karen was doing. He ordered him to keep an eye on the girl. Karen says he was sitting next to the prince. Devon asks what happened to the sentries guarding the gate. There was also a barrier. Karen replies that it was at that moment that the sentries had abandoned their post because of the incident in the garden, and the barrier was broken. The prince asks, does the knight mean that a girl with divine power could break the barrier which was created by the strongest magic? Karen tells him that they have investigated, and he thinks that chance played a role here. Devon gets angry and asks, is it really an accident? After all, the kitchen door happened to be open, and the guards happened to leave their post. And also Karen talks about the barrier being accidentally broken. He asks, does the knight want him to take his word for it? Because then he would have to accidentally administer the knight's punishment. The knight apologizes to His Highness, but the prince says that as soon as he gets stronger, the first thing he should do is change his guard. Because maybe Karen was too relaxed. Karen will accept any punishment. At that moment, the butler holds out a medallion to the prince and tells him that this medallion was discovered the day the lady disappeared. Devon senses that this locket smells like daisies. The butler says the locket looks like magic, but it's not dangerous. and a more detailed investigation requires the prince's permission. But the prince says it's not important. The butler asks, "Will Prince Duan leave it at that?" The prince gets up from his bed and says that Evelyn has broken his curse. Thus, she has fulfilled her promise, and the prince has no reason to pursue the girl. At this point, the prince says he feels a little dizzy. The knight turns to His Highness and says that it is better not to get up for a while so as not to overexert himself. Devon doesn't understand if it could be the effects of the treatment. He says that he is just a little dizzy and that it is nothing serious. However, he asks when he will be able to see. The doctor replies that if he goes to the enhanced vision training, the prince can see in a few days. But since the prince has been unconscious for a long time, he needs enough vitamins and nutrients. Of course, all this time the Magi have been maintaining his condition. But at this point, the prince asks how long he has been unconscious. The doctor is afraid to answer the prince, but Duan gets angry. He tells them to answer him as soon as possible. The butlers turn to His Highness and tell him that the prince lost consciousness about a year ago. Devon asks how this is even possible. The maids discuss the fact that His Highness will remove the bandage today. They were afraid the prince would get sick when he heard that he had been unconscious for a year. At that moment, a maid appears and shouts at the cook that they should stop talking. The prince is having a hard time without it. He has to regain his health, and he needs to be well fed. One girl asks if the prince has recovered. Then now the lady must come back. But the maid doesn't know that. And after the prince fainted, the mistress hid her whereabouts all this time. They're upset because mistress and the prince are very well suited for each other. But Evelyn was probably from a good family because she always ate everything they cooked. And the principal must have been attracted to this trait of the girl. For when she ate, she even asked for more. And it was the first time the maids had ever seen her eaten clean. Their master is a fastidious eater. After all, their workers are recognized even in other houses. But now is not the time for her to talk. His Highness will be down soon and the maid must hurry. Meanwhile, in the prince's room, the butler asks if the prince really doesn't need any help, because if he needs anything, the prince can call for him at any time. Devon says that he just needs to tie the bandage and that he can do it alone. At this point, the prince removes the bandage and opens his red eyes. He goes to the doctor, and the doctor is also impressed. After all those days, that the prince has been tormented by the curse are behind him, and the doctor starts to cry because now he can go home with peace of mind. The doctor asks if there might be a problem. At this point, Print asks why his right eye is so blurry. It turns out that Prince's right eye is black in color. Prince looks at himself through the reflection in the glass. He remembers Evelyn talking about how she had one condition and she needed money to leave the empire. Evelyn didn't realize at the time how much money she might need. And now the prince realizes that Evelyn wanted to leave. He doesn't understand. Did Evelyn really want to leave him? At this point, the maids are discussing the prince's right eye. They saw it themselves and think the other servants know about it. And everyone is whispering in corners. And also the rumors can quickly reach the capital. After a while, the prince and the knight sword fight. As a boy, the prince was called the red-eyed one. Everyone will probably look at him strangely because the dark prince has one black eye. Suddenly, the knight's sword flies out of his hand. And the knight can't even believe that until recently he was lying in bed. The prince asks the knight if he's too weak, but Karen replies that it's only by His Highness's standards. The prince extends his hand to the knight, and Karen says he hasn't fought him in a long time. The knight still can't believe the prince is awake. The prince asks if it's true, because he feels as if they have fought recently. The knight says it's been a whole year, and the prince hasn't woken up in a year. Everyone in the castle is very excited. He asks if the prince's eyes are really okay. Duan says that his right eye is cloudy, but in normal life it doesn't bother him much. Devon no longer hears that strange voice, and there is no need to listen to the sound of footsteps. The knight says that the curse is gone, and his eyesight is fine. He doesn't understand why the prince's right eye is not seeing well. Suddenly, a butler appears and starts calling for His Highness. The butler says that the analysis of the medallion is finished. The prince asks, "What is this object?" But the butler tells him that as the prince suspected, it contained a chamomile-scented liquid. The prince replies that this is what the prophecies said it was. The prince doesn't know how Evelyn found out about it, but she intends to deceive him. The prince doesn't understand how Evelyn dared to do this. At this point, the prince suggests the knight to fight again. Sometime later, the knight was sitting in his study when the butler came to him. The butler turns to His Highness and says that rumors of his healing have reached even to the islands. The prince is angry and talks about how fed up he is with all this. The butler says that judging by the letter that came, it seems like they've been waiting for this moment ever since the prince passed out a year ago. The prince just wants the butler to write the answer instead. But the butler replies that if the princess finds out about it, the prince won't hear anything good from her. Devon talks about how the princess never showed up at this place, even though he's been unconscious for a year. And it is possible that Killian Diego knows where the rogue is. The butlers turn to His Highness and tell him that it seems to him that Mistress Evelyn is not so bad. The prince realizes this. Evelyn knew she couldn't heal him completely. That's why she ran away. But it seems to the prince that the girl had another reason. Suddenly, Diego's bone comes to the principal. He has heard that the prince has recently regained consciousness. He thanks the prince for agreeing to take him in. The prince asks what Killian has to say to him. Killian congratulates the prince on getting rid of the curse. The prince thanks the guy, but he asks what this has to do with him. Killian talks about the prince looking for that girl the fortune-telling says. Devon that he asked if it has anything to do with the knight, but Killian says that as far as he knows, anyone with divine power can break the curse no matter what the prophecy says. The prince asks that the boy not make him repeat his question a third time. Killian says that to be honest he wanted to say something, but suddenly Killian notices Evelyn's medallion that he gave her. The prince immediately thought the guy's talk about the curse was strange, but he doesn't understand. Did Killian really came here for the Evelyns, though Devon has heard that Count Diego's children are very friendly with each other, and Killian is probably worried about his missing sister, so he's looking for her wherever he can. And it was probably by chance that Killian heard the rumors about the prince and came here. That's what the average person would think, but in principle he understands. How? This is possible because Killian heard about what is going on in this wilderness and immediately asked for an audience. Principal goes to his sword that hangs on the wall. He says that for a man who is the commander of the Knights of the Princess, Killian knows the rules of etiquette too badly. Killian cries and asks where Evelyn is, but the prince doesn't understand what the guy is even talking about. Killian gets angry. He asks where Evelyn is. At that moment, the prince draws his sword and holds it out to the knight. The prince says he wouldn't let the boy get up from his seat, much less did he authorize him to walk. The knight apologizes, but it seems Killian has found the lost thing the prince asks. Is it really? This thing is in his room. Killian goes to His Highness and asks him, for this one is more valuable than his own life. Killian asks, is this thing really more valuable than his life? The prince asks if that means Killian can die for this thing. At this point, Killian takes his sword with his hands and blood appears on his hands. Killian says that if he doesn't find that girl, he has no reason to live. The prince asks what Killian is talking about, but Killian continues to ask His Highness. Killian begins to hold the prince's sword to his neck. He asks the prince to give him back the girl Evelyn. At this point, the prince starts laughing and talking about how Killian really is a true warrior. He asks, did Killian mistake him for some demon king who kidnapped the princess? The prince says that if Killian wants it so badly, he can look for it himself. He'll give him a week. The prince says his castle is Killian's estate and he can turn it upside down. However, if Evelyn doesn't find her, the guy will have to kiss his life goodbye. Killian leaves the prince's study. The prince thinks that he has a feeling that Killian has come to look for his lover, not his sister. Killian starts searching the prince's house. He calls out to the girl and tells her he's come for her. He searches all the rooms but can't find the main character anywhere. He can't figure out where Evelyn really is. For the first few months, Evelyn was always worried that someone would come for her. But news from other countries reached this snowy area badly, and almost no one came to this place. So the days were quite quiet. The girl comes to a man who talks about some good meat being brought in today. He will sell it cheaper. He asks if the protagonist will take it. Evelyn replies that of course she will. After all, the meat in the man's shop is the best. The man asks the girl how long she has lived in this place. Evelyn says that she has been here for a little over a year, and if you count by years, almost 2. At this point, the man holds out a cup of tea into the girl's hands. The man says that if it has been 2 years, she is already 20 years old. He talks about how that young girl has grown up very quickly. The man still remembers how Evelyn came to this place after losing all her family. She's been through so many hardships, but Evelyn's still hanging in there. In fact, the main character came up with this story. After a while, the protagonist stands in the forest under a tree, and she does not understand how this can be. After all, about the safety of this city is legendary, but is there really a monster in the forest? Evelyn simply decided to take a shortcut because of her heavy burden. She doesn't understand why this happened today. At this moment, the protagonist hides behind a tree and is surrounded by a huge monster. The girl thinks to herself that this can't be happening. She tries to hide from the monster, but suddenly her groceries fall, and the monster notices the girl. He grabs her, and Evelyn thinks about the difficulties she has gotten out of the circumstances of the story she doesn't understand. Is she going to die in such a ridiculous way? At this point, the girl starts screaming and asking for help. She wants someone to help her. Suddenly, someone swings his sword and blows the monster's head off. Evelyn starts to fall. She doesn't realize what's happening. At that moment, the girl finds herself in the hands of a guy. At that moment, Evelyn notices that she is in the hands of the prince. Evelyn doesn't understand how this is possible. The prince becomes angry and asks how Evelyn could deceive him and then avoid him. The protagonist can't understand what Duan is doing in this place. The prince talks about how this is not the right moment to be silent and admire his face. He asks, "Is it really as Evelyn imagined it would be?" The girl sees the prince's right eye and realizes that she was able to heal it. At that moment, the prince throws the girl to the ground and says that he thought it was strange from the beginning that Evelyn was fainting quickly. But the girl from the prophecy is not supposed to be like that. After all, the prophecy says that the daisy-scented goddess of the small sun will deliver the prince from the curse. At that moment, the prince retrieves the necklace the girl dropped, and he speaks of her familiarity with the object. He doesn't know how Evelyn knew what the prophecy said, but it's the first time he's seen such an ingenious con artist who even resorted to a magical object. Evelyn thinks about the fact that it's been a year, and she didn't think the prince had been looking for her all this time. The prince bangs his fist against a tree and approaches the girl. He asks, when Evelyn decided to deceive him, didn't she think it would be a heavy responsibility? But Evelyn does not listen to the prince. She touches the prince's face with her hand and asks, "Can't the right eye see at all?" The prince replies that he sees with that eye, but vaguely at that moment, he removes the girl's hand. He speaks of the fact that Evelyn knew and that she could not heal him completely. Evelyn replies that she did, but even that girl from the prophecy probably couldn't have completely broken the curse. After all, she told the prince that there was something in his right eye besides the curse. The prince asks if Evelyn knows how to get rid of it. But Evelyn really doesn't know. Evelyn asks, "What does the prince do?" The prince touches the girl's delicate face with his hand and talks about how the butler was right when he said she had golden hair and blue eyes. He talks about how Evelyn pretended to be the girl from the prophecy and tricked him, having no idea of the cure. The prince says there's only one thing left to do. He asks Evelyn to marry him. Evelyn is confused. She doesn't understand what's going on. Evelyn starts running back to her house, and the prince says that the girl's locket had magic on it that allows you to locate it. He asks if Evelyn knew about it. Now, the girl understands why Killian was so quick to agree to get her that necklace. Evelyn replies to the prince that this is the first she has heard of it. She asks if it might be better to break it all together. The prince replies that that might be a good option, but there's a chance that the necklace might come in handy. He asks the girl if she's taken all her things. After all, Evelyn won't be coming back to this place anytime soon. Evelyn asks what kind of nonsense the prince was talking about getting married. Devon asks, doesn't Evelyn want to marry him? The protagonist replies that naturally she doesn't want to do that. The prince replies that if Evelyn doesn't want to, there's nothing to be done about it. Evelyn doesn't understand why the prince took her answer so easily. The prince replies that he suddenly wonders if Evelyn would say the same thing if she went back to the forest and sat there with her hands and feet tied. Evelyn replies that she would if the prince threatened her. But at that moment, The girl realizes that there is nothing she can do about it. And after a while, Evelyn is already sitting in the prince's carriage. She thinks that without the blindfold, the prince inspires even more fear. After all, he has imperial blood in him for a reason. Evelyn wonders why the prince is asking her to marry him. After all, it's been a whole year. She asks why the prince has come to this place. Suddenly, Evelyn asks how the prince even knew she was in this place. The prince replies that he didn't hold out much hope, but Evelyn didn't sell the brooch and kept it. All jewelry made for the imperial palace has location tracking magic, Evelyn asks. Is this brooch really from the imperial palace? After all, the prince told her that this brooch belonged to his mother. The prince asks why only Evelyn kept the brooch until now, but the protagonist asks how she could throw away the thing to the prince's calm mother. Evelyn asks why the prince is asking her to marry him. The prince replies that he was trying to heal his eyes, so he looked everywhere for a way. He invited priests from the temple and the most capable mages from the magic tower. And he's even invited the best doctors in the empire. But none of them know what's wrong with his eye. But Evelyn gets angry and says she doesn't know either. The prince replies that Evelyn may not be the maiden of fortune, but she broke his curse. And that fact means the girl has some kind of connection. He asks, does Evelyn really not know anything? Evelyn thinks about the words the dark essence told her. She didn't understand what unfinished child meant. After all, the strange voice called the girl an unfinished child, so she couldn't begin. Evelyn doesn't understand, maybe. Maybe it has something to do with her past life. She tells the prince that during her last treatment, she talked to the creature. And she doesn't remember exactly, but it also said that Evelyn would see him. But no matter what, the prince will never believe it. That the girl has memories from her past life, so she shouldn't talk about it. The prince concludes and says that the creature had an interest in the protagonist. Evelyn replies that she also thought that the creature didn't want to hurt her. She doesn't know what it is. But that's just her feeling. After all, it's higher than human. The prince asks if, with skills like the girl's, Evelyn can't recognize a deity. Evelyn replies that it may be a deity, but she doesn't know for sure. It may not be God, but it may be equal to God. It made a nasty laughing noise. The prince says that perhaps this creature is familiar to him. After a while, the protagonist and the prince arrive at the castle. The servants meet the lady, and they are incredibly happy. At that moment, Hilda rushes into the mistress's arms. Hilda asks where mistress has been all this time. After all, she was very worried about the girl. Hilda says that she has missed her. Evelyn can't remember if she and the maid were that close. At that moment, the knight Karen welcomes the protagonist. After all, as it turned out, Evelyn has unprecedented skills. He did not expect from the girl. After all, Evelyn went down such a high wall and broke the barrier. Karen says that's amazing. Evelyn laughs and says it was so easy, and it seems the prince's armor is even thicker. She asks if the knight is okay. The prince replies that it's nothing, because thanks to his mistress, he now gets up at dawn and trains. Along with the other guards, the castle has a 24-hour guard. They sleep 3 hours a day, but the discipline has improved. Evelyn replies that sleep is still necessary. They need enough. The girl also says that it's not easy for them.